It's hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field. Or the run rules on the diamond at Love's Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Mainline. I'm Adam Jaquez. He's Tyler Burton. A little bit different type of show than what we've had over the last 2 weeks. Previous 2 weeks, we did a deep dive into both the offense and the defense side of the ball, and of course, special teams as well for the upcoming season for Oklahoma. This week, we're doing a little bit of a deep dive into the schedule itself. I think I'll be getting some thoughts off of my chest and defending Oklahoma to, I guess, just the general national perception is where OU is right now. And Tyler, we'll see what kind of perspectives you have along the way as well. But welcome in. How are you this evening?
I'm good, Adam. Things are good out here in Denver, Colorado. A lot of good things going on. We've got the PGA Tour BMW Championship coming out to Denver this weekend. Excited to get out there at Castle Pines Country Club, check out some golf, follow Scotty. But yeah, man, we've got college football starting this weekend. We've got some games coming up here in just a matter of days. Oklahoma gets this thing kicked off in less than 2 weeks' time, and yeah, it's the best time of year, and I could not be more excited. Excited to really talk about Oklahoma's schedule, kind of go through this game by game, give our prediction on what we think is going to happen from a wins and losses standpoint. Kind of go through the chat here, kind of touch on some of their thoughts, and really just kind of gauge where we think that this Oklahoma program is, and try to evaluate how good of a season or how bad of a season, if you're Adam, we expect this team to have. But yeah, let's dive into that. I'm excited.
We're going to go through game by game, essentially, and just talking about a little bit about each one of them.
Yeah.
And stick around to the end, and we'll premiere the hype video for 2024 that we produced. If you've seen any of our ones in the past, whether it be for softball, baseball, football seasons have passed, they're usually pretty interesting. So stick around. You'll see it first here live on the YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, you'll have to make sure that you're following our YouTube channel by searching the Mainline Podcast or following us on Twitter at the Mainline Pod to see it when it premieres there. So let's dive into schedule. Temple starts a week from now. Tyler, I don't know if I'm getting a little bit of like fuzziness on your audio there. I don't know if it's anything odd on your end. But and if you're listening in the chat, let us know, because it was giving me some feedback on Tyler's audio. But Temple, first game, we're going to talk a lot more about Temple a week from now in our game preview there. So I'm not going to waste much breath on the Owls. They come to town. I think it's a 42.5 point spread. It's a W. That's about all I have to say on Temple at this point. And I'm ready to move on to the next one if you have nothing there.
Yeah, coming off of a measly 3-9 season in 2023 that included a 1-7 record in the American Athletic Conference. They're going into year 3 with Stan Drayton as the head ball coach. Many media outlets are predicting the Owls to finish dead last in the AAC. Adam, plain and simple, I don't see this being a 73-0 blowout win like Oklahoma had over Arkansas State in the season opener a year ago. But I don't think that there's any reason to expect that Oklahoma doesn't cover the 42.5. And, it'll be a fun atmosphere Friday night at Norman. The Pals should be rocking. It's going to be our first chance to see, this new look offensive line, Zach Alley's defense, Jackson Arnold, so much more. But, this should be a stress-free win to kick things off. So Oklahoma's going to go 1-0.
Yeah, moving on to game 2 against Houston. It's kind of an interesting one because you've got a really good coach in Willie Fritz moving over to the Cougars there, but not a great roster, really. I mean, yeah, you've got Donovan Smith, the quarterback there, who's okay, I think, but I don't know that he's enough of a difference maker to really overcome the rest of the roster there. They lost most of their playmakers at receiver. They have a lot of inexperience on defense. They had a lot of games that they just weren't competitive last year. Now, the flip side to that is they did play a 1-possession game against Texas, so I guess anything is possible, but they had that game at home. This one will be in Norman. They lost to Rice last year. So just when I look at Houston, I feel like they're at least a year or two away from Willie Fritz really turning that program around. But yeah, it's nothing there that I think is all that notable. I think this should be another easy win for Oklahoma.
Yeah, but on the flip side, the competition definitely ramps up a little bit in week 2 with the new look Houston Cougars come to town, new head football coach Willie Fritz. Thankfully, former Tulane quarterback Michael Pratt isn't accompanying Willie Fritz, but they do have a formidable guy under center in Donovan Smith Jr., who did make some plays in big games last year, but did struggle with turnovers, throwing 10 interceptions. And even though they only returned 5 starters on that side of the football, this is still a team with above average talent who are now being developed by much better head coach now that Dana Holgerson is is now out of town. And remember, Adam, this Houston program was one play away last year from defeating Texas. So, Oklahoma's going to have to show up. You would hope to see this Oklahoma offense continue to progress. Coaches often say that a team makes one of its biggest jumps of the season from week 1 to week 2. And Houston's going to bring a couple of guys that Oklahoma fans are going to be all too familiar with. And, cornerback Latrell McCutcheon, linebacker Jamal Morris. But I like Oklahoma in this one by 20-plus points. Oklahoma should move to 2-0.
We might need you to check all your mic settings there, Tyler, because it's still your voice is coming super crackly. So yeah, apologize on the fuzziness on the voice there. You might need to just plug everything back in and make sure that the correct mics synced up there. But as far as moving on to game 3 on the non-conference slate there, Tulane, this is one that I think everyone's just kind of skipping over and going straight to Tennessee and saying, yeah, 3-0 in non-conference to start off the year. But Green Wave, have some solid pieces. They don't have the quarterback in place necessarily. It sounds like Ty Thompson, the Oregon quarterback that transferred there, probably is not going to be the guy. It might be a true freshman or a redshirt freshman in Darian Mensah. You've also got Kai Horton there from last year who took over for Michael Pratt when he was injured at times and looked okay. So a little bit of uncertainty there from the quarterback position there. And John Summerall, a really good coach out of Troy, coming in, taking over some really good pieces on defense that I like a lot. But they lost one of their best receivers to Tennessee. So they're going to be relying, I think, pretty heavily on Mackie Hughes, 1,400 yards on the ground from the running back position. So I think Tulane's good enough to make Oklahoma have to really stretch themselves, and maybe that game doesn't get put away until middle of third quarter, fourth quarter at most, because Tulane is a very good program, better than the team that we saw in 2021, I think it was. So there's some things there that I think will make you have to work and challenge themselves. But overall, I think that program is a little bit of maybe not rebuilding, but restructuring, I guess, with a new coach there and some of the players that left. So I think this one should be another one that Oklahoma should be able to win fairly easily. And we got you on mute again, Tyler, having the mic issues on a Tuesday night.
How's that? Any better?
It's a little crackly, but it sounds a little crackly. Better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're just going to roll with it. So don't really know what else to do. But yeah, Adam, Tulane's offense is going to be the best. I think the best unit that Oklahoma will have faced in the first 3 weeks of the season. Ultimately, we don't know who they're going to try out there at the quarterback position, but they do have 8 starters back on an offense that also adds key wide receiver additions from the transfer portal. Mario Williams from USC, Shaz Preston from Alabama. That helps round out a skill position group that will be the best that this Oklahoma defense has faced through the first 3 weeks of the season. I would love to see Mario Williams get reacquainted with Billy Bowman over the middle, or have a chance to meet Michael Boganowski. But while I believe that Tulane has the talent to be a contender in the American, there's levels to this game, and Oklahoma should roll for the third straight week.
And then it gets pretty interesting when we talk about Tennessee coming to town. One that I saw, ticket sales, at least from StubHub reports, ticket sales going really well for that game. I think there's a ton of interest. Obviously, you've got Nico Yama-Aliava, if I said that right, coming to town. And he's a guy that I think people just assume is going to be good. And it's kind of weird because I feel like the national media is saying, oh, Nico's good. He's fine. Jackson Arnold, big questions around Jackson Arnold. Nico's proven. And that's really not the case, in my opinion. Nico's a guy that really, he was asked to play against an Iowa defense where, okay, you score 7 points and you're fine. And he had 3 rushing touchdowns against the Hawkeyes. Didn't have a ton of passing yards, didn't have a ton of rushing yards, just kind of ran the offense enough. And it was good enough to beat the Hawkeyes in the bowl game. Take what you will out of a bowl game. I don't know that
one start,
say a whole lot. Yeah, one start. So the sample size is super small there. And I do have questions about just where that Vol offense is going to be, because everyone goes, oh, okay, last year the problem, it was Joe Milton. Now you plug in Nico, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Jalen Hylett was a big part of that 2022 Tennessee Volunteers team. Do they have one of those guys right now? And I'm not convinced that they do. So I'm not convinced that they have an elite running back either. You like that they went out and got Lance Hurd at left tackle to shore up the offensive line. But I think there's a lot of questions about this Tennessee team. And for a lot of the same reasons that we'll talk about here in a moment with Auburn, Nico's big, first true road start coming to Oklahoma. I think there's some big questions about Tennessee, and maybe the Vols finish the year really strongly and are a playoff team, but I wonder about them that early in the season.
So who are you picking?
I'm picking Oklahoma. I think that one's one that just the energy and the focus for Oklahoma, I think, is going to be too much for Tennessee to overcome on the road.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. This is when the season truly begins for the Sooners and the Volunteers, although I think that we'll know lot more about Tennessee than Oklahoma at this point in the year, given the Volunteers matchup week 2 against NC State, what I believe is Charlotte. So there will be copious amounts of storylines going into this matchup. College game day is almost certain to be in town for a potential primetime matchup at night. Josh Heupel makes his return to Norman for the first time since being fired as the offensive coordinator under Bob Stoops. And you've got an elite newcomer quarterback matchup, Jackson versus Nico, Oklahoma's first SEC game. This will be the biggest game in Norman since Ohio State in 2017. And this will be the best, craziest, I think most hostile atmosphere that Oklahoma fans will create in quite a few years. And I can't wait to fly back for it. And, Adam, this game immediately makes me kind of think of the 2012 matchup at College Station between Florida and Texas A&M, where, it too was the Aggies' first game as a member of the Southeastern Conference. And, even though the excitement level in Aggie land was at an all-time high, Florida proved to be a better team and, overcame the noise, beating Texas A&M and ruining, what was a special day for the Aggies. Now, I think that this is where we'll see where this Oklahoma team is. And this is the game where I think Brent Venables finds out about Team 130 and what he has at the quarterback position. And, it's where we finally get the question answered, about how good is this offensive line, because Tennessee has one of the best defensive lines in college football. Amari Thomas, James Pierce, Dominic Bailey Jr., guys who can stop the run just as well as getting after the pass. But on the plus side for Oklahoma, Tennessee does have to replace all of their guys at the linebacker and in the secondary. So you've got a back seven that Tennessee's going to be breaking in brand new. So Jackson Arnold should have a big opportunity through the air if the offensive line can hold serve at the line of scrimmage. So you flip it over to the other side of the football, the matchup where Oklahoma is at early in this season. When you look at what Tennessee has offensively, yes, all the talk's going to be about Nico, but you've got skilled players like Brew McCoy, like a Squirrel White, Chris Brazell. It's going to be a massive challenge, and they've got the best center in college football to go along with that as well in Cooper Mays. And even though on paper I like this Tennessee team maybe a little bit more than I do Oklahoma, especially this early in the season, I just don't see how Oklahoma in this environment with so much excitement, so much eagerness and anticipation building over the last couple of seasons where Oklahoma joins the SEC. I don't see how Oklahoma does find a way to win this one. And I think Jack Arnold makes a couple more throws than Nico does in crunch time. Oklahoma grinds out a close win to move to 4-0.
Yeah. I think we're still getting some feedback in the chat there about your audio, Tyler. I don't know if it's possible to change your mic maybe to your headphones or something. See if you can play around with that setting potentially. But Tennessee, a 3.5-point underdog on early lines there with some of the lines coming out of Vegas. Not everybody has a line on that one yet, but I think that's kind of a good place to start there. And then following the game against Tennessee, Oklahoma goes on the road for the first time in the SEC to Auburn. Oklahoma actually a 3-point favorite in some of the betting sites that have that currently. A lot of people talking about the storyline there with Auburn of, okay, Peyton Thorne, maybe he's getting back to where he was at Michigan State. He'll have a lot more receivers there with Keandre Lambert-Smith transferring in from Penn State. You've got Cam Coleman, the 5-star freshman that he's got at his disposal now. They really turned that room around. You've got Jarquez Hunter there at running back, which is solid. But I really just wonder, Peyton Thorne, we've seen him for 4 seasons in college. I kind of feel like we know who he is at this point. And Keandre Lambert-Smith came from Penn State. He had Drew Aller throwing him the ball, who I think is, I'd say, pretty safely better than Peyton Thorne. So it just makes me wonder about that team in terms of is a wide receiver room that gets transformed? Is that enough to turn this Auburn program around? Yeah, it's year 2. Hugh Freeze is a great coach. It's going to be a difficult place to play. I just wonder if is Auburn really more a year away of being the team that is going to start throwing their weight around? And I think in terms of how Vegas has placed that line, it sounds like there's agreement on that. Now, all that being said, I basically just set it up to say, oh, you should win that game, and they should. But it'll play out a little bit more when we go through the rest of the schedule. I just think I'm zagging when everyone else is zigging here in terms of what the record and what the game result will be. So I'll pick Auburn to win that game just because I feel like, upsets happen, weird things happen in college football. It's not how you predict it. So this one just feels like a game where I'm just going to go the other direction and say Auburn will get that. That'll be Oklahoma's first loss of the season.
All right, one final time. How's the audio sound now?
It is still super crackly. I don't know if you changed mics or anything. Yeah,
we changed mics. I don't know. At least so.
That sounds a little bit better. Go ahead.
Sounds a little better. Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with you on Auburn, going into year 2 of Hugh Freeze coming off of the 6 and 7 season where, even though 6 and 7, I thought that the record looked worse than how good the team played at times, especially at home. And, everybody knows how difficult it is to play on the road at Jordan Hare. I think that was Carson Beck that actually told Jackson Arnold that stadium's kind of cursed if you're an away team. So they lost 27-20. It was a one-possession game, went down to the final stretch in the fourth quarter against Georgia. They lost 27-24 against Alabama on what was a 4th and 31 conversion by Jaden Milroe. 9 starters back on offense, 8 on defense. I know that there's a lot of people out there that think that Oklahoma just simply, they've got the better player at quarterback. They're a little bit further along with Brent Venables in year 3 than Hugh Freeze is in year 2. But I do think that you've got to give respect to the fact that Oklahoma's going to be going into a hostile environment, and Auburn is no slouch when it comes to that atmosphere and that fan base. So I think that ultimately Oklahoma does go into this game. I think that it's close. I think it's competitive, but I do think that Auburn figures out a way to eke out a close win. So I think Oklahoma's 4-1 after the trip to Auburn.
And all that being said, there's a good chance that Oklahoma is able to go in and just say, hey, we're the better team, and throw their weight around and win that game. And potentially you go into Texas undefeated. And it's all right there in front of it. It's just kind of okay, there's going to be a loss somewhere, at least at some point in the season. So it's it just feels like you have to put it on the schedule at some point. So Oklahoma will round out the game there, coming back to Norman, taking a week off, and then heading down to Dallas to face Texas in the Cotton Bowl. And this is a tough one for me because I always want to be objective. I want to take off my crimson colored glasses as much as possible, but it is so difficult to do that because every offseason, all the talk is on Texas, a team that, lost some key pieces that OU pushed around, was the more physical team. The team that I think was more motivated to be there, was more dedicated to running the ball, in my opinion, last year. And I don't think anything's going to change this year because I think Texas will be okay with Jaden Blue. I think he'll be a fine running back for them. It's when you need to go to guy number 2 and guy number 3 and then guy number 4, which Oklahoma has had to do many times over the course of the year. We can tell Texas all about that with running back injuries. They had one last year themselves with Jonathan Brooks going down. So things will happen. I don't think Texas will be able to run the ball nearly as effectively as they want to in this game. I think Oklahoma's defense improved significantly. I think Texas's interior defensive line takes a step back, no matter what you say of, hey, they went out and got a transfer in Jermaine Lole. He's a guy, go back and watch the first show that before he ever committed to Oklahoma the first time and was just visiting. And I said, I don't know. He seems like kind of a reach there, maybe a depth piece at best. Now he's at Texas and he's one of the key pieces that they're going to rely on in the middle there of their defense. I just don't see it. I think Oklahoma's the better team. I think they're more physical. I don't think that the transfer receivers they're bringing in are any better than what they had last year. And let's be honest, Xavier Worthy struggled to get to 1,000 yards. It wasn't until the final season that he was able to do that. So either he was completely misused, was overrated, or Quinn Ewers was just completely ineffective, making him the superstar that he was. But you put, Xavier Worthy in an Oklahoma jersey, that's like a B- receiver over the last 15 years. That's not really that special, but the national media will hype up a lot about Texas, and I just don't see it. I think Oklahoma is the better team here, and so I'm picking Oklahoma in that one.
Yeah, when you combine the college football playoff berth a year ago, and you combine it with the fact that Texas didn't win a Big 12 championship, plus the favorable SEC schedule that that they were dealt this year, I think that there is a little bit of overhype when it comes to the Texas football team. I'm not as high on them as most of them are. I actually think that Texas has an opportunity to be one of the most disappointing teams this year in the SEC. And Adam, I think you make a really good point when you look at what this team lost to the NFL. Obviously, losing Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy to the NFL. I'm sorry, but Jonte Cook and who is it? Isaiah Vaughn,
Matthew Golden from Houston. They got Silas Red. Yeah. Not
feeling the shoes of the impact those two guys left. Again, they lost a couple of impact guys at the running back position. This defense, even though I know that they had some nice additions in the transfer portal, but you still lost a lot of talent to the NFL. Especially on the interior defensive line with those two big boys. That won all those awards. But Oklahoma won this football game last year, and I think that this is going to be a much better all-around football team that Oklahoma was going to be bringing down to Dallas this time around. By this point in the season, going into week 7, you would like to think that the offensive line is going to be gelled. Jackson Arnold, even though this is going to be the biggest stage that he's going to have played on as a starter at the University of Oklahoma. You'd like to think that the games are going to slow down for him a little bit. And I think that Oklahoma, coming off of a bye week, they bounce back from a tough loss at Auburn. I think that they go into Dallas and they beat Texas for the second straight year.
Yeah. Texas, a 9.5-point favorite in the few books that have that one right now. Yeah. It's like, come on. Like, it's not going to be that big of a difference there. I think it's pretty clear that Oklahoma, even though they won that game last year, still not getting the respect. And so you almost feel like, yeah, Texas will want to win that game. They'll want some revenge, but almost feels like Oklahoma will have to go and say, like, what do we got to do? What do we got to do to prove everything that's going on there? So we'll see how that one turns out. Looks like we're going to try one last thing with Tyler's audio, see if we can get that to improve there. It was working before the show, and all of a sudden, as soon as we hit live, the little minions in the wires cause issues there. So after Texas, Oklahoma comes back home to face Shane Beamer and that South Carolina team. Lenoris Sellers recently named the starting quarterback for the Gamecocks. They are playing South Carolina in October, so never know what could happen there. But when I look at South Carolina as a team, I look at it and I go, okay, when was the last time South Carolina had a quarterback that was able to elevate that team to another level, to have that type of out-of-body quarterback experience that could just drag his team to a few more wins every year? And Spencer Rattler was a really good quarterback for South Carolina last year, but I don't think he was necessarily that guy that got them 2 to 3 extra wins just because he could put the team on his back. So I don't see the history there of South Carolina being able to have that. And I kind of feel like that's what they need to have in order to come into Norman, pull an upset. It's not to say they don't have good players. Debo Williams is a nice linebacker for them. Nick Harbor, everyone knows that guy being 6'5" and being able to run as fast as he can as a wide receiver tight end hybrid, but he's unproven. So I just don't see the playmakers there from the Gamecocks. I think this is a win for Oklahoma. And I think a lot of lessons learned from last year as far as how OU handled the post-Texas success. Whether they end up winning or losing that game, I think this should be a pretty solid, very focused win for Oklahoma.
All right, Adam, last chance.
That sounds much better.
Sounds much better. Okay,
yep.
We're back. I'm kind of in agreement with you here. And I think that when you look at the South Carolina game, Adam, for Oklahoma, this is a brutal 3-game stretch for South Carolina at the beginning of October. The Gamecocks play Ole Miss, then they go to Alabama before they come to Norman. I like where this game fits on the schedule for the Sooners. I know that they've got a couple of guys, especially on offense, and I want to start with the quarterback position here in Lenoris Sellers, who Shane Beamer actually, announced he is the starting quarterback for South Carolina going into week 1. When you combine him with the running back transfer from Arkansas and Raheem Sanders, I think that this has an opportunity to be one of the best, run dual threat, quarterback running back combinations in the SEC this year. Again, I'm not a huge believer in Shane Beamer with what he's got going on in South Carolina right now. Obviously, love the guy. Would love to see him come back to Oklahoma in some form or fashion. But I think that Oklahoma, by this point in the season in Week 8, I think that they're going to be firing on all cylinders, riding the wave of momentum coming off of a big win down in Dallas in the Cotton Bowl. I think that Oklahoma beats South Carolina by a pretty good margin, and Oklahoma's going to advance to 6-1 after they take down the Gamecocks.
Yeah. That one's the one that everyone's overlooking. So I just kind of wonder, is there upset potential? But I don't know.
It's a tricky spot. Coming off of Texas, you got the following week, you go to Oxford to take on Ole Miss. It's a tricky stretch, but I like that the fact that this is going to be a very veteran, senior-driven led team. Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman. I just don't see any way in which Oklahoma looks past South Carolina here.
Yeah. A little side note, because this came up in some of my research when I looked back at last year, and I wanted to see who had the toughest, most difficult schedule last year. South Carolina was at the top of the list. And so that's a big conversation that people are having about Oklahoma and almost dismissing the program and the team and saying, they're not going to do anything this year. They have the toughest schedule. South Carolina had the toughest schedule last year. And yeah, they didn't have the best record. I think that says more about what South Carolina is. But the reason that South Carolina had the toughest schedule last year was because they had number 21 UNC, number 9, Clemson. Number 12, Tennessee. Number 1, Georgia. That's tough. Also had Kentucky on the schedule. So I think that's a good reminder that, okay, what's in that preseason poll and that preseason ranking, what everyone expects to happen, normally doesn't happen. Some teams will be good. Maybe it's Ole Miss. Maybe it's Bama that for sure will be good. But maybe Missouri is a 7-5 team. Maybe LSU is a 7-5 team. Just the way we look at things, if all we needed to do was look at the preseason poll. We wouldn't play the game. So I thought that was a good reminder just that I got out of my research.
No, and I think it is, Adam. And this is a hard schedule to try to predict. And ultimately, we both got them sitting here right now at 6-1. But I think that the floor for this team is 7-5. When you combine how difficult this schedule is, where the SEC did Oklahoma no favors, and you combine that with the question marks at key areas like Oklahoma does, offensive line, quarterback, new coordinators, etc. There's a recipe in which Oklahoma goes 7-5 and barely makes a bowl game. But on the flip side, I also think that there's a world where the ceiling for this football team is 10-2. And, ultimately that would involve a better than above average offensive line play. That would be because, Jackson Arnold being that dude and taking care of the football. And that means that Oklahoma, most importantly, stayed healthy at the key positions all season long. So when you go into this league and when you look at the brutality of the schedule that Oklahoma has, I mean, you could make a case that, there's 5, 6, maybe even 7 toss-up games that are on Oklahoma's schedule this year. So they're going to have to come to play each and every week. Fast forward, Adam, Oklahoma going week 9 on the road to Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to be coming off of a bye, which is the theme for, I think, most opponents on Oklahoma's schedule this year, having a bye week before they have to take on the Sooners. I'm kind of same line of thinking here with Auburn. This is going to be a tough environment going on the road to Oxford to play in the Grove. This is probably going to be the best overall collection of offensive skill talent that Oklahoma's defense is going to play all season long. When you combine what Jackson Dart is going to do at the quarterback position, coached by Lane Kiffin, they're going to have a solid game plan ready for Brent Venables and Zach Alley's defense. They've got arguably the best wide receiver core in college football with Trey Harris, with Antoine Wells, and with Jordan Watkins. That's going to be a tough test for Oklahoma's secondary. And I just think that this game comes at kind of a tough stretch right now. You're coming off of 2 tough competitive games against Texas, against South Carolina, and this is really when the meat and potatoes of this schedule for Oklahoma kind of kicks in. So again, I think that this is going to be a competitive game, but I do like Ole Miss to ultimately win this game. Pushing Oklahoma's record to 6-2.
This is one that I did a lot of research on, and I wanted to find some cracks in the armor for Ole Miss. And I didn't find as many as I expected, but there were a few still. I am very impressed with what they've got on the team, both defensively and offensively. I think Jackson Dart takes care of the football really well. Not as much production as I would have expected to see from someone who is being touted as a Heisman candidate. Only 23 touchdowns through the year last year, had 8 on the ground, which is nice, but almost a nearly identical stat line to Quinn Ewers when it comes to passing, which is kind of odd. But I like the offensive firepower they have there. I like some of the pieces they got in the portal defensively. Running back, I'm not loving as much. I know they got Ulysses Bentley there. He's had some injuries. They got Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt from New Mexico, who had about 1,000 yards out there. So decent, but not like game changer. Not Quinshon Judkins necessarily. So,
Right.
But I think when I look at this team and I go, okay, where are the potential issues coming from? They've got 47 new players on this team this year. That's basically half your roster, more than half your roster. So what does that mean? I don't know. It could mean nothing, could mean a lot. I do know that, yes, they're winning in the portal, but I also know they only returned 4 players from their 2022 recruiting class. And that's typically the class that carries you to a championship run, is those guys that are now in their 3rd year of college. There's only 4 guys left from that. In fact, one of them, Xavier Harris, the defensive tackle, he's now facing domestic violence charges. So potentially he might not be around. So you just kind of look at the skeleton and you go, okay, I love that. I love that first line, those first stringers. But by the time we get to whatever this is, week 8, week 9 of the season, if 2 or 3 of those guys have, injuries of some kind, what's behind them? Or if someone transfers in and is a bust, doesn't fit in the system, what's behind that? And that's where I wonder about those issues. I also look at history too. The last 50 plus years, how many times did Ole Miss actually finish inside the top 10? 2023 and 1969. History tells us that this program is not built to do that. It's not used to doing that. I understand the transfer portal has changed some things, but I don't know. In my mind, I want to be able to bet on Oklahoma here as just being the better program with deeper talent. They may not have as many flashy transfer portal names that are new, but I think the talent overall is much deeper and denser at Oklahoma.
This is another year where we see another program, how the experiment with, utilizing the transfer portal as, kind of a primary source of, establishing your starting 11 on each side of the football. We'll see how that plays out. Ultimately, Miami has tried to do this. Texas A&M has tried to do this, especially with the NIL game, being a key component of their recruiting. Ultimately, college football has adapted. That is the model now that all programs are starting to lean to, but, they don't call Lane Kiffin, the portal king for no reason. He's made a living the past couple of seasons off of the backs of guys in the transfer portal. And, on paper, you can make an argument that this is the best, most talented team that Ole Miss has had, in decades. And it's just a matter of, can Lane Kiffin and this coaching staff, can they figure out a way to get this team to be able to come together? Is the culture right? Can they get these guys to gel and play complementary football for a full season? I don't know. Lane Kiffin hasn't been able to win the big one that's been able to put Ole Miss over the top into the SEC championship conversation to get to Atlanta. But if there's any year where this team is going to have an opportunity to do so, it's this season with Jackson Dart at the quarterback position. So again, as good as I think Oklahoma is going to be, I do like Ole Miss a little bit better in this situation. And Adam, that brings us to Maine.
Well, I got to make my pick for Ole Miss because I buttered them up quite a bit.
Are you doing this?
And then tore them down. I should pick Ole Miss here. I think that they have the better first line of the team. We'll see what they look like when we get to October 26th. I talked earlier about Auburn and how Oklahoma should win that game, and I zagged when everyone else was zigging. I'm doing the opposite here on Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss should win this game, but I know that Oklahoma, I think, will win a game that they shouldn't. That is unexpected.
Wow.
I'm picking this one simply because it's a little bit earlier in the day. I think Ole Miss is maybe I want to phrase this the right way because I do have a lot of respect for what they are, but I feel like the pieces could fall apart faster than it could for an Alabama, for example, if things go wrong for Ole Miss. We'll see. They don't play a lot of key opponents before this game, but I feel like Oklahoma will win a game somewhere that they shouldn't. So this is me just putting a risk out on the table and picking Oklahoma in this one.
So does this have more to do with Oklahoma, or is this the game that Lane Kiffin just simply botches every single year?
Maybe
I don't know. Of both.
I think it's more or less just saying, hey, I know that it's not going to go exactly how I predict. So I'm trying to just pick a random game, not random completely, but just saying, hey, like here's one that Oklahoma shouldn't win. I'll pick them to win that one. So I do want to get to 1982 Boomer Sooner in the chat here, asking which road game we're looking forward to the most. I don't think I'm going to go to Ole Miss, but I think that would be my pick for this year, just in terms of like small college town. I think it'd be pretty cool as opposed to like a Baton Rouge, which is a bigger city at the same time. So I don't know if you have one that you're looking forward to the most, though.
Yeah, it's Baton Rouge. I do have plans right now to make it down, with some of the family to go down there to Death Valley. Hopefully it's a night game to watch Oklahoma and LSU. Yeah, that's by far and away. We've heard it, basically, since we were little kids growing up, that, the ambiance of playing at LSU, at Death Valley, at night. I think that, ultimately we'll get to our prediction with LSU here in just a little bit, but yeah, by far and away, that's it for me. I think that when you look at Ole Miss, I think that there's more intrigue surrounding the pregame and the party that's going on outside of the stadium, more so than there actually is what's going to be going on inside, when these guys line up in between the goalposts. But yeah, it's LSU by far and away for me. And when you fast forward to 2025, is this the year where Oklahoma goes to Michigan, or is this 2028? Am I a year or two off?
Next year, Michigan is at home. I don't know if it's the 2026 that they go to Michigan, but next year they're at home.
I would say on the flip side for me, I think that Knoxville would ultimately be pretty cool to get to go out there and watch Oklahoma take on the Vols. But I'm going to go with Alabama here, just simply because it's Alabama. They've been the best program in college football for, the better part of 2 decades now. To go out there to Bryant-Denny, watch Oklahoma play in Tuscaloosa. I'm going to go with Alabama there, but Knoxville's a close second.
Yeah. So deep dive into the Maine Black Bears here.
Win.
Yeah, I think that's about all that needs to be said on that one. I'm curious to see like what the vibe is for that game, because I think the get-in price is already below $40, maybe even below $30 on StubHub for that one. So I'm curious to see fans that I would not want to travel up from Dallas for that one or travel down from Tulsa. I'm curious to see what the vibe is for that one. We'll see. Maybe Oklahoma's 9-0 heading into that. Everyone's excited. They want to be there no matter what. Maybe we're, 5-4. I don't know, but
I've got a feeling that at least one of those days of practice during that week, you're going to be watching Missouri film, even though you're playing Maine on Saturdays. So we'll see here.
Yeah. Let's move on to November 9th. Oklahoma heading to Columbia, Missouri at Mizzou is where they'll be there. And this is, I think, one that Oklahoma fans are looking forward to quite a bit. They return the quarterback Brady Cook, who I think is solid. I just wonder, is he going to be able to get even better, or is he kind of maxed out what he is in college? He's got some great receivers to throw to, obviously. And a lot of people talking about the running back position, trying to replace Cody Schrader there. I like what they got out of the transfer portal. Marcus Carroll from Georgia State, Nate Noel out of App State, two very productive guys. Nate Noel battled injuries quite a bit at App State. He spent a lot of time on my fantasy football team on the bench, so I'm very familiar with what he's able to do when he's on the field, but it's just been limited in certain cases. So I like that. They lost 4 defenders to the NFL. I don't think Missouri is the type of program that necessarily replaces their top cornerbacks, their top defensive end, and is able to just reload like that. And they've got a new defensive coordinator coming in from South Alabama and Corey Batoon. That is interesting because South Alabama's head coach is Kane Womack, now the defensive coordinator at Alabama. So you wonder how much of that defense was Batoon's, how much of it was head coach Kane Womack's. I have questions there, but Missouri, I think it's similar to Ole Miss, but maybe at a greater disparity of Oklahoma's got deeper talent across the entire roster than Missouri does. And where is Missouri at that point in the season, health-wise, injury-wise, and so forth? They are a 4-point favorite as it stands today. I'm taking Oklahoma in that one.
Yeah, when you look at the Missouri Tigers schedule, it's really a 3-game schedule, in my opinion. They've got to go on the road to College Station to take on Texas A&M. They've got to go on the road to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. And there is Auburn that is kind of, sandwiched in between those two opponents, but they do get the Tigers at home. And then they've got Oklahoma coming there in week 11. And I think that this is a game that Oklahoma, I know that their coaches, I know that their players, I know that this fan base has got this trip to Columbia Circle because there's a little bit of animosity and bad blood, I think, between these two programs right now, not necessarily having to do with anything regarding the actual play on the field over the last, 20, 30, 40 years, because we all know how dominant and one-sided that this has been in Oklahoma's favor. But when you look at all the stuff with Caden Green, you look at some of the stuff that's been thrown out there from Theo Weiss and his family, and, Eli Drinkowitz, being the clown that he is, and all the recruiting battles that have kind of gone back and forth right now with, Williams Nwaneri last year, Caden Green, Lamont Rogers being another one as well. This is something that Oklahoma, their coach, their players, and this fan base, we're looking forward to. Missouri coming off of a bye, which is going to play well for the Tigers. They've got quarterback Brady Cook, who's earning a lot of accolades in the preseason, being part of the, some of the preseason All-American teams for the SEC. Wide receiver Luther Burden, by far and away the leader going into this season for the Blitnikoff Trophy. Theo Weiss, Mookie Cooper. They did lose their defensive coordinator to LSU, and they have to replace quite a few guys who are now in the NFL. But at the end of the day, Adam, this is the road game that I think that Oklahoma, they go up to Columbia and they take care of business. I think that this is really going to be an opportunity where, much like I kind of compare it to Baker Mayfield going to Tennessee, and even though this isn't going to be that early in the season where Baker and the Sooners went up there to Knoxville, I think that this is really going to be an opportunity for Jackson Arnold to kind of have his coming out party on the road in a hostile atmosphere. I think that Oklahoma goes up to Missouri and they take care of business, and they're going to be 7-2. Or I guess 8-2 after a big-time win in Columbia, Missouri.
That takes us to Alabama after a bye week in Norman. Right now, Bama a 2-point favorite. And when I look at the Tide, I'm not sure I see the supporting cast around Jalen Milroe just yet. I know they've got some former 5-stars waiting in the wings there. So I'm really just kind of trusting the Alabama system at this point to produce elite playmakers like they do pretty much every single year. I don't know if we had... I guess Isaiah Nair, was their best receiver last year. I know they have Jeremy Bernard, who transferred from Washington. He was their number 3 guy for Michael Penix last year. He is now at Alabama following DeBoer. But, there's the coaching change. Everyone's talking about that. Does DeBoer change too much too fast, causing, speed bumps along the way? Or does he try to, keep a lot of it the same and it's not what he needs to do to have his system in place? I don't know. There's a lot of question marks there. I would expect a lot of them to be kind of ironed out here by the time Alabama comes to town. But you also look at Alabama, and they've got one of the toughest schedules that maybe they've ever had, at least in recent memory for sure. And so you wonder, like, what does that program and team look like if they roll into Norman with potentially 2 losses? They got to play Georgia. They got to play Missouri. They got to play LSU. Probably someone else I'm not thinking of before they even come to town. So
they got to go to Wisconsin week.
They got to go to Wisconsin. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about the Badgers, but it's early. You never know if they might be able to, get them before Alabama gets really rolling. So you just kind of wonder about all that. But at the end of the day, like, this feels like, I don't want to see it, but it kind of feels like 2016 Ohio State coming to town, where we found out pretty quickly that, okay, our roster is not on the same level as this team that's on the opposite sideline. It's interesting that Vegas has a 2-point game. That's really close in my opinion. We'll see. I know the fan base will be fired up for that one, but I just feel like Bama's roster is too deep. And that's the same reason that I'm giving Oklahoma the edge when they go to Missouri, when they go to Ole Miss. And Oklahoma's not going to have that edge here despite playing at home. So I'm taking the Tide here, unfortunately.
I know that Nick Saban is no longer the head football coach in Tuscaloosa, but Alabama's roster is still full of NFL guys on the 2 deep at every single position. So, and let's not forget too, Kalen DeBoer has won at every single place that he's ever been to. And now you're giving him the keys to a Ferrari to drive this Alabama program led by quarterback Jalen Milroe. And yeah, you make a good point, Adam. This is a really, really tough schedule that Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide are going to face in year 1 of this new regime. But ultimately, I think that the biggest reason why I side with Alabama here, it's not the fact that, that I like Jalen Milroe a little bit better than Jackson Arnold. It's not the fact that I like, Kalen DeBoer. I think he's a better football coach than Brent Venables. But I think that once you get into, week 12 and 13 of this football season, when you look at where Oklahoma's roster is, as much as it has improved over the last 3 years with the top 10 recruiting classes that Brent Venables has continued to bring in since he took over here in Norman, Oklahoma, I think that there are levels to this game, and there's levels to the amount of depth and, talented depth that Oklahoma is still trying to build to where they can be on the same level as an Alabama or a Georgia. But I think that this is really going to kind of come down to how healthy is Oklahoma at this stage in the year. And I think that this is just going to be an instance where the better talent is going to win out. And yeah, I think that it is going to be a ruckus environment. It is going to be senior day. It's going to be a bittersweet, final game for some of these seniors that are beloved at the University of Oklahoma. But at the end of the day, I think that this is kind of where the wheels start to come off or maybe rattle just a little bit. I think that Alabama gets this thing done and Oklahoma moves to 8-3.
That Bama game, we kind of put that out on Twitter earlier today at the Mainline Pod, and we put the Bama game, we put the Ole Miss game, and we put the LSU game out there. And right now, Oklahoma not favored in any of those games in Vegas, so they are the underdog. We asked, hey, which of those 3 games do you think is most likely for Oklahoma to pull the upset? A lot of people said Alabama. I was a little bit surprised at that. Maybe it's just because they're at home. I don't know if it's disrespect of they don't have Saban anymore, but I think Kalen DeBoer, I agree with you there, is very solid. So we'll see. I'm sure Oklahoma would love to have that one. I've got Oklahoma at 9-2. You've got Oklahoma at 8-3. That takes us down to LSU for the finale after Thanksgiving. This one, to me, LSU, we know they're kind of that roller coaster program. They're favored by 5 as it stands today. They lost 3 defensive tackles to the NFL. I don't think they really replaced them with much. I think their best defensive line get in the transfer portal was JVR Suggs out of Grand Valley State, the guy that OU kind of kicked the tires on, but eventually found someone better. So I have some serious questions about LSU's defense. I think they will get better with the new coordinator there and just the fact that your offense won't be scoring nearly as often and as fast. But I also have questions about the offense. I think they'll be good. I think Garrett Nussmeier is solid, but he's also, out of all the young quarterbacks that are starting for the first time, Nico, Jackson Arnold, Garrett's the one that we've actually seen the most out of. He's played significant amounts of various games throughout the last 3 years. And I think he'll be good, but I kind of feel like we have the biggest track record there. And it's not like Heisman winner. It's not playoff quarterback necessarily quite yet. Very, very good still. And he'll have some nice targets. CJ Daniels, transfer from Liberty. Kyron Lacey was a good piece for them last year. So I think they'll be all right. They've never really had the running back, unless you go all the way back to like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So that's like 5-6 years ago at this point. So, it's been a while since they've had a dominant running game, but I just don't see LSU as this team that I think Oklahoma should be scared that much of. I think we're scared more of, it's Death Valley. And yeah, Death Valley is scary, but they've boosted that record based on a lot of teams that aren't very good. That's a lot of wins against not good Mississippi State, against usually not good or average Ole Miss, not good Arkansas, average mediocre A&M. It's really Alabama that goes in there and wins on a regular basis. So Death Valley, very tough to play, but the good teams go in there and win. So I'm taking Oklahoma here.
You've got Oklahoma going 10-2.
10-2. Sharpie.
Shit. Okay. All right, this is where we're going to go the other way here. Garrett Nussmeier, very good quarterback. He's not Joe Burrow. He's not Jalen Daniels. There is going to be a little bit of a drop-off at the quarterback position down to Baton Rouge this year. They do still have phenomenal skill talent, especially out at the wide receiver position. They probably got the best left tackle in college football this year in Will Campbell. He's going to be a first-round NFL draft pick. You make a good point, Adam, the fact that they weren't really able to, bolster the roster on the defensive side of the football, particularly on the defensive line. I know that front seven there's some question marks this year, and this is coming off of a season where LSU was one of the worst defensive teams in the Power Five collectively. So again, I think that Oklahoma going into this matchup, I think that this is probably the biggest toss-up game for Oklahoma. I think that when you look at Alabama, you look at Missouri, you look at Tennessee, you look at Ole Miss. I think that this game against LSU, this is probably a game that I think that Oklahoma might have the best chance based on the current layout of the roster compared to these other teams. But I do think that once you get down to the very end of the season, I think that LSU, I know that they're not quite the team that we saw, back in the Peach Bowl or, even some of those teams in the early 2000s. But I think that Brian Kelly, as good of a coach as he is, he's going to have some things figured out by the very end of this season. And again, it's easier said than done going into LSU, going into Baton Rouge and winning this game. So I think for that reason, as good as I think Oklahoma is going to be this year, I do think that Oklahoma falls in Baton Rouge this year. And I think that they finish this regular season up at 8-4.
8-4 with wins over likely ranked teams, Texas, Tennessee, and Missouri. That probably puts you back in the Alamo Bowl, if I have my bowl game straight, because it's still tied into the old Big 12 system there. So I don't know if Oklahoma fans will be too thrilled about that. My record has Oklahoma at 10-2 with ranked wins over Missouri, Texas, Tennessee, probably Ole Miss, potentially LSU. We'll see how that would shake out if that were to be the case. But 10-2, I think pretty obvious. That's probably the spot Oklahoma really wants to be, is in the playoffs safely, Adam, but not in the SEC championship game.
Adam, if you're 10-2, you're in serious consideration for being one of the two representatives in the SEC championship game in Atlanta, and you're a lock to make the college football playoff.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely possible. I think that there are some questions that definitely need to be answered. And I think that if Brent Venables and Bill Beanbo, especially, if they can push the right buttons here, if they can hit all those right notes, I think that 10-2 is definitely possible, but I'm just not quite there yet. I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid quite like you are at this point. I do think that 8-4, I think that's a good season. It's not the
three ranked wins. That'd be good.
It's not what Oklahoma fans, who we talked about it on this podcast all offseason, talking about how you kind of have to redefine your expectations on an annual basis, where you're not going to be able to, you're not going to win an SEC championship every single year. You're not going to find yourself in the college football, semifinals each and every single season. But I do think that, an 8-4, 9-3 type season, that is a really good, foundation that Oklahoma can build upon in year one of the SEC. Especially with what they're doing and what's going to be another remarkable 2025 recruiting class. Hopefully it gets a little bit better tomorrow at the offensive line position. But I think that anything 8-4 above, especially if you've got multiple ranked wins, maybe whether it's 2, whether it's 3, I think that that's a good season for Oklahoma. And that's something that you can build on going forward into 2025 with Jackson Arnold coming back with some more experience on the offensive line. Yeah, you're going to have to replace Danny. You're going to have to replace Billy, but you've got some guys that are absolute dudes, behind them, that it's going to be their time to shine. So I can't wait to see this thing kick off, man. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun.
My final 2 cents on this, and kind of how I came to this conclusion of I think Oklahoma is going to do better than what people think, is because I think there's a lot of talk of, the schedule. And when you look at, a lot of rankings like ESPN's FPI or Cade Forward rankings, things that are more computer-driven, analytical, they're not always right, but I think they know some things, they're able to measure some things. And I think there needs to be balance between some of that and some of the, let's just kind of feel, we feel the schedule is tough, like we're going to predict this. And all the rankings are going to stay exactly the same throughout the entire season. There's going to be ebb and flow there, but the analytical rankings really do love Oklahoma. I think they have OU at 9-3 with wins over Oklahoma or Ole Miss and LSU is what ESPN's FPI ranks them. The K-Ford rankings have Oklahoma 8th. We're starting to see a lot of those rankings come out, and they have Oklahoma very high. And I think that speaks a lot to the fact that they're very high on Oklahoma's defense, and defense travels. The other thing that travels is special teams. We'll see if that one's actually better this year, but we anticipate it will.
I think that Josh Pate said that he had him power ranked at 12th overall in the country, and I think he's got him going 8-4 as well. So again, 8-4, that's not a bad season. Is it what we want at Oklahoma? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that 8-4, that's a solid, inaugural season in the SEC, and that's something that Brent Venables and this coaching staff and really this program can build upon. But again, I think that 7-5 is the absolute floor. I don't quite see the path as easy as you do, Adam, for a 10-2 type season, but it is there. You just laid it out for us. But I think that it remains to be seen. But again, I'm very, very excited to see it. We get to watch this thing kick off in 10 days' time.
Next week, we'll be on season 5, episode 4, doing a game breakdown for Temple, talking Owls. It'll be exciting. We'll have our 5 best bets of the week. That'll start back up next week.
Let's go.
Yep, get ready for it. We're going to make some bad picks there, I'm sure. But one of us is going to come out a winner at the end of the year, and we'll never stop the trash talking on it. So that's going to do it for us this week. If you're listening on the podcast, this will be the end of the show. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to get to see the first look at the 2024 Oklahoma hype video that we put together. So we will roll that now, and we will see everyone next week for the next episode of The Main Line.
Sun in the sky, you know how feel. Breeze drifting on by.
There's no limits on what Oklahoma can achieve.
It's a new dawn. It's a new day.
Championship coach, Heisman winners. I mean, I've not seen anything like it, Paul, in the SEC.
For me, yeah. And I'm feeling good.
Ready for those big boys up front, man. They're going to take y'all to the woodshed. See, I don't think that's going to happen to Oklahoma.
You know how I feel. River running through.
Is Oklahoma being overlooked? I think they are.
He has a chance to have a ton of success in year 1 at Oklahoma. He has too much ability to not be a big-time player in the SEC.